Alright, it is time for a series talk video on The Sword and the Stone. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm super excited to be here today and to do a series talk video on The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White. If you're unfamiliar with series talk and the style of video that I'm doing on the channel, I will leave a link up above and down below to my introduction to this, but the gist of it is that it is a content-filled, discussion-y, spoilery video about a book within a book series, because I do read a lot of book series, but I don't end up talking a lot about book series because it always feels spoilery to do so. So instead of not doing it, I decided just to give these books their own video so we can actually talk about them. So that is what we are going to do today, and we are going to be talking about The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White. It is the first book in the Once and Future King series. I have it in this bind-up, which has the first 4 titles, and this one is a bit complicated on lots of different levels. I feel like all of the questions that I have more than one answer, so let's just dive right in. So even when this was published, it was originally published in 1938, but it was revised and republished in 1958. I do have the 1958 edition. This is from the 70s actually, but I do have the story, the revised story, because I looked up some of the differences and I definitely read some of the differences. So I read the revised 1958 version. As I mentioned, it's the first book in the Once and Future King series. It is a complete series at 5 books. There was a 5th book that was released after T.H. White passed away, but I do think a lot of people consider the Once and Future King the first 4 books, and maybe even its own book. Like, I don't know if this is considered like book 1 of 4, book 1 of 5, a quarter of book 1 of 2. I don't know how people determine it, how they classify it. I am not sure. And that kind of stuff is just going to continue because I consider the genre of this, for me, I consider it Arthurian, and I do consider that its own genre, but it is also a book that is generis, which means of its own kind, or in a class by itself. And in terms of the creative arts, what that means specifically is a work that goes beyond the conventional genre boundaries. And I do think this one does do that. But if we're getting super, super technical, I guess you would put it in fantasy because there is magic. But I consider Arthurian its own genre. So on my list, it's Arthurian. And I guess technically you could say it's adventure, because there's definitely adventure in this one as well, but because there's magic, it's definitely fantasy. And then depending on how you feel, whether or not King Arthur is historical fiction or if it is fable, folklore, legend, you know, I think everyone gets to choose that one for themselves. So this one like breaks all the rules. It breaks all of the rules in so many different ways. But I read this in April 2019, and the rule that it didn't break was that I loved it. Oh my gosh, I gave this 9.5 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. It was great. So if you're unfamiliar with any Arthurian anything, well, you'd probably wouldn't be watching this video. I don't know, maybe you would. But for me, one of the weird things about this is to come to this at this point, because I've read Le Morte d'Arthur, but the majority of the Arthurian things that I know are all from film, especially Excalibur. That was probably the first Arthurian film that I saw, and then there's the sort of 2002 King Arthur, which I love, and then there's the most recent, the Legend of the Sword, which I actually also love. So I love the Arthurian things. I am really down with all the Arthurian things, and this one follows Arthur mostly as a kid and a young, I don't know how young adult he gets in this one. Like, it feels like it goes from being a kid to mid-teens, maybe, to squire age, whatever age squires are. And we follow him, but he is called, in this, he's called Wart, which I think is like art, and then W for maybe ward, because he does seem to be a ward of Sir Ector, who takes him in, and he sort of is very brotherly friendly with Kay, who is Sir Ector's son. So those are some of the main players we deal with. Of course, then there's also, of course, Merlin, who comes into the mix of things to educate Arthur on things, or Wart on things. And one of the wonderful ways he does this is through magic, because that just makes it so awesome. And just one step further into that is that he lets Arthur become animals. Animals. He becomes a fish. He becomes an owl. He becomes a bird. I don't remember if he becomes a badger. I remember him talking to a badger. I don't remember if he was a badger. He might have been a mouse. And more birds. There were a fair amount of birds. I had no idea. I had no idea there would be animal transformations and talking to other animals. I was like all over that. I was all over that. I just loved it and enjoyed it so, so very much. And it actually had a lot of philosophical things that I agree with when he was talking to the other animals as well. And it was a real joy. It was a real treat. It was really, really wonderful. I love the character of Merlin in this as well. And he does a couple of things that are pretty funny. Not funny per se, but he's, like I think there was this whole section. So like mostly what I loved, and a lot of the book is about Wart being animals and things. But he also wants to like have some adventure and go fight or something. And so there, Merlin does send him off with Kay, and they end up finding Robin Wood. So I guess that's supposed to be that's Robin Hood, and also Marion. And they do have this whole like several chapters adventure arc with them. And I can't remember exactly what they were doing, if it was like a heist situation or prisoners they were trying to free. There's something at a castle. To be honest, I can't remember that much about that one. But it was what Arthur wanted. He wanted to like get into the action of things. And so he did. And I kind of felt like Merlin was kind of like, I could use some days off. You go hang out with them. Go hang out with them. So I thought that was really funny. And I wasn't sure, and like, because at some point they weren't supposed to be gone for a long time, him and Kay. So, but it does take a little while for them to get back. So it felt a little mischievous from Merlin's end. I don't know if I'm reading into that too much or not. So, but it was a lot of fun. But like as the story progresses, we get into the sort of more traditional stuff in terms of the sword and the stone. But that, I will say, that did not happen till well into the book. Like the whole Excalibur, and I don't remember if they used the term Excalibur, but that was like second or third last chapter. It was really, really, really at the end. It was really more about the adventuring and the learning from nature. And I think there was one quote early on that Merlin had that really won me over. Wasn't that? Education is experience, and the essence of experience is self-reliance. Okay, so that's not about nature, but still, I was like, yeah, yeah. I don't remember if it was Merlin that says that, because it does not give the speaker, so not sure. Um, Still can't tell. It might have been a dog. I'm not sure. Anyway, I thought that was true wisdom right just there. Yeah, this was just a joy to read. I did have some challenges with it, like one of which it is dry and the font in this is small. So it did take me longer to read than I expected, which I tried to be patient with. And not everything stuck. Not everything stuck. And that's not I don't love that, but it is the truth. Sometimes I would like read it before bed and then fall asleep and then the next day go back and have to read the last couple of chapters. Sometimes I perhaps might not have gone back and read all of the chapter, but I still felt like I got the gist of it. And as I said, there were certain parts that I enjoyed more than others. And so I think that's fine. I think that's fine. But I was really surprised that it took a long time to get to the sword and the stone stuff. So we do eventually get to that because Uther Pendragon does pass away, and then the land is left without a king. Sorry, I get lines from Excalibur in my mind like all the time when reading this and thinking about it. And But there is a sword that is embedded in a stone, and it is said that whoever pulls the sword out will become the king. So people think that there was no heir, but as it turns out, as we know, probably if you know anything about Arthurian legend, we know that Arthur is the heir. And he was, he was staying at Sir Ector's, being fostered, I guess, sort of. But then there's a big tourney, like, because it's all tourney, because that happens a lot in the book. Or they talk about them a lot, and it's at the point where Kay can compete in the tourney, but Wart is just a squire, and it seems like that's sort of as much as he's going to be able to do. But then Kay misplaces his sword, or Wart misplaces the sword. He has to go running for the sword. The only sword he finds is, the sword in the stone. He's able to take it out of the stone. And they do try and cover it up for a little bit and pretend that it was Kay, but they do eventually, try a few times and realize, nope, it really is only Arthur that can do this. And then Hector says, Merlin came to me with you as a young boy, and so you totally could be Uther's son. And so we find out that, of course, he was, because that is the way of things. And so for me, it really is hard to not think about it in terms of the other stories I know, whether it's Excalibur or the other films, or Le Morte d'Arthur, which not a lot stuck, but almost all stories start with Uther, not with Arthur. So that was actually really cool. And this one really has a really warm tone to it. There's lots of anachronisms where the writer is speaking to, and sometimes Merlin is speaking to the audience and is aware that it is a long time later. Like, they even use the term anachronistic when they're talking about like a hat that Merlin is wearing. Anachronism, if you're unfamiliar with that as a term, it means that something is illogical. It's, you're seeing a time period and something in it is from a future time. So not in a time travel way, but just like if someone had an iPhone in the 60s, it's just like, that's an anachronism. It didn't happen. It's a technical thing that was not invented yet. But it's done in a jovial way to sort of like wink at the camera, or like let the viewer, the reader know. And that helped me when I started to see those things, because when I've heard people talk about this book and there's this sort of whimsy, there's a sort of look on their face, or a sort of like wistfulness. And I think that element where the author is directly like winking at the audience is what can bring that feeling. So I was really happy just to sort of understand what that was. Like, I love the story, I love the magic. There were so many things that I loved about it, but I think that element is one thing that brings it one step closer, because it makes you in the know. You are now closer, and that can be a really cool thing. I don't always like it, but I did enjoy it in this one. So I loved this book. I am really looking forward to continuing the series. I do plan to read like all 5 books. The next one is much shorter. It's only 100 pages long in this, and so it's half the length. This, because the Sword in the Stone was 200 pages, and in my edition is actually called, very familiar if you're interested in current titles, The Queen of Air and Darkness, but I think it's more commonly known as The Witch in the Wood, and in the woods, perhaps. So I hope to be reading that pretty soon. I'm looking forward to where it's going to go. I actually do not know. I do know like stuff about Arthurian legends, as mentioned, and but there's not tons of women characters, so given it's called like The Witch in the Woods, I think it's probably going to be Morgana or Morgan Le Fay, as opposed to Guinevere, but who knows, maybe they both will show up. So yeah, so that was The Sword in the Stone. It was a huge joy. It's so nice, especially for a title that I have wanted to read for so long, to it end up being something that I truly loved. And that was a real joy. And I really look forward to the next one. I'm not going to set any predictions because I've seen so much other content with these stories and legends. So I think I'll just, hopefully it'll have, like, for me, the big one is, for me, there's lots of the Knights of the Round Table that I get mixed up. In terms of their personalities. So I'm hoping maybe with this one it might stick, but so far we haven't met anyone yet. I don't know if Hector becomes a Knight of the Round Table. I don't know if he will get to Knights of the Round Table. The only other person in this that was Sir Pellinor, which he sort of lives sort of close by and was around a lot, but I still don't have a strong sense of him as a character. So, because mostly we hung out with Wart and the animals. And it was awesome. So there you go. That was The Sword in the Stone. I look forward to the next book and the next series talk video. I'm having so much fun doing these. I hope that you are having fun watching them. So thank you so much for watching.